Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Ask Octopus, where we take your interesting questions and we do our best to answer them. Joining me today is Ryan and Derek. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, I'm good, Bob. How are you doing?
I am doing great. It's Friday, so I'm excited.
It's always good on a Friday. Unfortunately, it's a bit rainy, as it often is in Glasgow and Scotland. Apart from that, I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Oh, yeah. Every time we record, it's like you're 4 p.m. So as soon as we end this recording, it's basically you're done for the day or the week.
I'm out. Mic drop, and it's weekend time.
So I'm going to ask you guys a question. Have you guys been asked this? How do I create template projects to be used in deployments?
All the time.
All the time. And so the answer that we've been giving is you can't, but there's a caveat to that. You can if certain things happen. With the addition of workers and the deploy or release step, I think we're getting closer and closer to that. So what I want to do is I want to show you what I mean by that. So I have this web project that sits out here, and it's not doing a whole lot. And so what it does is I just have it do work. But then you'll notice I have this deploy or release from the approvals project. And that starts at the very, this is the very beginning. So let's go and look at that approvals project. And this is just a manual intervention, web admin approved, business owner approved. These are just two manual interventions that I've added in here. So if I wanted to, I could come in here, and with the deploy or release step, if you're not familiar with it, is the release has to exist in that what we call the child project, so the approvals project in this sense. So when I create this release, it's going to create a new version, 2019 1.3 for me. But you'll notice it goes, I have a package to deploy. And if you expand that out, it's actually the approvals project. So basically, package is the loosest term possible. But what I can do is, I only have one version. So I just select that, go ahead and hit save. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy this to dev. And with my manual interventions, I have it running in all my environments right now. And so what will happen is it'll actually pick up and it'll start running those manual interventions for me. It just takes a couple seconds. So I'm working on my cloud instance. There we go. And said, hey, we've started this project, and in about a second, it's going to go ahead and let me know that, hey, we're waiting for approvals on this. It's like, hey, you gotta jump over to this release. So I go ahead and just jump over here.
I do like that it surfaces the manual approvals up to the parent project.
Yeah, except that assigned to me doesn't really do anything right now.
Right. But you get the nice link to jump to it.
Yes.
I have been bitten by that where I clicked assign to me and I was like, waiting.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I have done, and I'll dive into my project in just right now, is I've sent in the name of the project. So in this case, it's Web Project 1. And the way that I did that is if we dive into the process in the approved deployment, you can pass variables into this. So project.name, web project. And so that's what the approval is looking for. That's the name that it's looking for. So it says, I'm approving this for this project to this environment. So I can just go ahead and hit proceed. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit proceed for both of these. So then it will finish off the deployment. So that's pretty cool. Now, one thing you'll notice right here is if we were to say come to this release itself, each of those releases that I've been doing it's doing a different deployment. Basically, it's creating you see right now I've done deployment number 4 to that particular environment for this instance. So every time that I do a deployment for this particular release, 2019.1.1 on this approvals project, it's treating it as a separate deployment task, which is actually really cool because then what I can do now is I have Web Project 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and trigger Web Project 1 and create a new release for it. Let's do 1.4, deploy to dev, and I'm just going to let it deploy now. Now I'm just going to let it sit there. And I am going to now go to, eventually, there we go. You'll see that now I have a manual intervention. Now I'm going to do is I'm going to start Web Project 2, create a new release, deploy to development, and deploy here. And I'm going to complete this entire release without going back to my other deployment. And I can do that because, again, each deployment is treated as a separate task. So if knowing that, then you can do quite a bit of different things. This is more of my can this work test with manual interventions this morning than anything. So
yeah, and that works because the manual, once a task is paused for manual intervention, it allows any other task to start working. So a manual intervention for one deployment won't hold up another deployment.
correct. Yep.
Yeah.
So I can go ahead and you'll see that in this case, it's going to be probably number 6. So deploy to development number 6 down here. That's what's happening. So you saw the previous one was number 4. The one I did before this one was number 5. So now we're at number 6. So go ahead and assign to me, proceed, and it will finish this up while it's waiting for this other one, while this one still is on that manual intervention. So it's queued right now. It dropped into the queue, and it'll eventually pick it up and go from there. So that's an interesting thing. So I was able to put all of my approvers into a single template project, basically. So I could say, hey, this is, in order for me to deploy my websites, this is my approvers. In order for me to deploy a website, it needs to go through these website approvers now. I don't have to constantly add those over and over again. I don't have to constantly add the web admins. I don't have to change anything like that. It's just, here's my project. And then the reason why I really like this is because now I've started doing it for my infrastructure as code. And with this, what I've done is I have a process that I've configured. Oh, the database is pretty simple. Let's look at the web. The web one's a little bit more exciting because I create a resource group, create a web app, register it, deregister. When I'm building up and tearing down, this is my infrastructure as code. All my variables for this that I need are all prompted variables. So inside of my process, let's look at my create Azure web app. These are going to have a bunch of variables. I do have a global one, which is fine, but then I have just a bunch of variables that I'm expecting to get passed in. And again, I don't know why it asked me that. And again, all these variables themselves are prompted. But when I come into my project itself that I call, so let's look at this process. It's going to pass in all those values. So even with prompted variables, it can let me do that. So that's the nice thing about this is you can have as many variables as you want that you pass in, and then you just provide it the necessary values, and it will go ahead and it'll take those values, and that's what it's going to use for that individual project. So how does this work? Why does this work for some projects and not for other projects? You're probably wondering. Well, all of these projects, the projects that I've shown you, like the manual interventions, in this case, my ARM templates, they can run either on a worker. They're either going to run on a worker, or basically it's going to run on a worker, or it's going to run on the Octopus server. I don't have any workers configured in this particular space, so everything's going to run on the Octopus server. But basically, if it's going to run on the Octopus server, like manual interventions or email notifications, or you can have it run on like on a worker pool, it will work out just fine. And in fact, that's how we do it for all of our demo infrastructure on our demo server as well, is we're running, I think, on like an Azure worker. Because I just give it a worker pool and just let it go to town. And I don't have to worry about blocking deployments or anything, because with workers, they don't have that, it's not a mutex basically. So that's how you can do something like that.
Yeah, if you did have something that was blocking, you would have some queuing build up if you were using targets and deploying IIS sites or Windows services to a virtual machine or physical machine somewhere that could queue up and have to wait for those to finish. But it would still work as far as like the templating goes.
Yeah. And this would work fine if you wanted to use actual roles and targets. It would work fine if you had like a set of servers that was shared across multiple applications in that sense. So yeah, I worked at a company and we built out, we call them Titan servers when I was there, and they were like these massive behemoth servers that hosted all of our websites. In that particular sense, we could have a deployment process that kind of follows that exact same thing. The difficult thing is that roles are not variables. So once you specify a role in a process, it's going to use that role.
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to jump back over and give you a quick TLDR. Hopefully. Let's try that again.
We have to change it to like TLDV, too long didn't view.
Yeah, exactly. So to leverage this, you're going to use child projects in the deploy release step, and definitely use that ability to pass variables into that child project. That's what's going to really have a lot of power in that particular thing. So essentially you're creating those templates. It's sort of like a poor man's step template in that sense. You're not really providing like individual values like, hey, this is going to be a password or this is going to be anything like that. It's really just, here's a variable, here's the value. Read the documentation to know how that step works, because there are a couple little quirks, like namely the release has to exist on that child project before the parent project can call it. And once that parent project's release is created, it snapshots that. And so it says, all right, I'm going to be using that release in that child project from here on out for the entire deployment process. So it's not just going to pick a different one on each environment. Some examples for some type of template projects, like approvals, like I showed you, notifications. So if you want to do like Slack, if you want to send out Slack notifications, a couple customers I talked to, they do, every time they do a deployment, it's Slack, Teams, and email. I'm like, it's kind of like that Womf from The Office.
Yeah. Deep
infrastructure as code if you're doing database deployments. And here's something that's interesting is you can use output variables as well. And I was reading through the documentation today, and then you can pull those output variables in your parent project. So the child project will have an output variable. In the parent project, it can actually reference that output variable, which I thought was pretty cool. So if you wanted to, you could have some decision trees as well. Well, not decision trees, but you could do some various business logic where you can just set an output variable. But basically, anything that doesn't require a specific role is kind of a good use case for that. Hopefully it can help you just kind of trigger a few ideas on how you can leverage it yourself. There are some quirks in it, so I'd recommend testing this out and getting it kind of dialed in on how you want to use it, rather than just changing your whole process all at once.
Yeah, one quirk that I've seen come up a few times in the community is some confusion around channels and child deployments, because there are some things that kind of make sense that they pass through. Like if I deploy my parent project to dev, then all the child projects are going to dev. That makes sense. But because you pick the release of the child release at like parent release creation, that channel, the child channel, is tied to that release. So you could have, I'm deploying to this specific channel of my parent, but it's using the channel of the child project for whichever release you picked. And that's caused a little bit of confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all the more reason why I like having a limited set of life cycles, not having a bunch of different life cycles, and having kind of a consistent channeling process across all of your projects as well. So I'm working on a couple projects right now where I'm going to have basically two different channels in each project. There's going to be one for the developer feature branches, and then there's going to be another one for main release branches, but I'm going to have the same channels on every single one of my projects. And so that way it picks the same one, and I'll even have version rules as well. So that's an excellent point. When you do the deployment on the child release step, it doesn't really look at like the individual channel. Like it looks at the individual channel, but when it says I want to deploy to production, for example, what it will do is it will say, okay, on that child release step, in its life cycle, can I deploy to production right now? Yes, I can. Or no, I can't. I didn't go to this other environment. Whereas the parent project with its life cycle, it could go to production. So if they don't match up exactly, yeah, you're going to run into those types of issues. So yeah, it's going to be definitely lots of testing and kind of dialing in to get it working perfectly for you. But it is possible. I don't really consider this a workaround. I just think it's just like an interesting use case on that deploy release step.
Yeah, I think I've worked with a customer to use channel rules with the deploy release step to make sure that you're always picking the same releases that are in the same channel as the parent project. That's probably going to be a good blog topic. I may write that up later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that definitely is a nice augmentation to all this. But yeah, that's awesome. All right.
That's really cool, Bob. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So if you have an interesting question, you can submit it to us at hello.octopus.com/askoctopus. There's a form there. You can go ahead and also email us if you have a support question. We'll definitely want to help you out and solve your support issue. And depending on what the question is, we'll probably pick it and try to answer it in the next video. We also would love to chat with you. Go ahead and join us at octopus.com/Slack. Derek, Ryan, and I, and everybody else on the customer success team likes to help out and kind of monitor, keeps an eye on that from time to time, and do our best to help out the community. But there's a lot of nice people there. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Ryan, for joining me today.
Thanks, Bob.
Cheers, Bob.